through military and security decisiveness, to fight the rebels, and to impose control over all the villages and regions to which rebel leaders belong, and also the areas inhabited by the rebellious tribes. The emergency plan stated that this aim was to be achieved through the creation of these semi-regular forces from Arab tribes, which were to be provided with training and arms, assigned to a commander, and be assisted by the Sudanese armed forces with, and I quote, fire support and air assets during military operations. In addition, the plan stated that one of the purposes of creating these semi-regular forces from the Arab tribes was to, and again I quote, assassinate sympathizers from amongst community leaders, the umdars, and local administration officials. This semi-regular force was known as the Janjaweed, although it was also referred to by other names such as the Fursan, Arab militias, Peshmerga, or Mujahideen. Other semi-regular forces included the Popular Defense Forces, the PDF, the Central Reserve Forces, the CRF, and the Popular Police Forces, the PPF. The Chamber finds that it was this emergency plan which provided the blueprint for the commission of the crimes which then took place. Acting on Government of Sudan instructions, the Janjaweed carried out armed operations against several predominantly Fur and non-Arab villages in Darfur. Some of these operations were carried out jointly with the GOS forces, and during these operations, villages were pillaged and destroyed, civilians were murdered, raped, persecuted, mistreated, and forcibly displaced. Whilst many more villages were targeted, the operations charged in this case concern Kudum, Bindizi, Mukja, and Dalej. Particularly in Mukja and Dalej, 4 men of all ages who had fled with their families to Mukja and Dalej from the ravaged villages were detained, tortured, and subsequently taken to areas outside the towns where they were executed by members of the Janjaweed together with Government of Sudan forces. I turn next to the accused. The accused, Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman, was born in Rahat al-Badi at South Darfur in 1949. He belongs to the Taisha tribe, which is generally considered to be an Arab tribe in Sudan. A major issue in the case was whether during the charged period the accused was the man known by the nickname Ali Kushaib, and as such was the leader of the Janjaweed forces. The accused is a former member of the Medical Corps of the Sudanese Armed Forces, from which he retired in the early to mid-90s. A certificate from the Council of Medical Assistants and Technical Professions of Sudan states that Ali Muhammad Ali qualified as a medical assistant in 1984. And the highest rank held by the accused while in the Sudanese Armed Forces was that of a Musaid, in other words, a warrant officer. Upon his retirement from the Sudanese Armed Forces, the accused lived for the main part in Garsila, a town located in the Wadi Saleh area of West Darfur, and he opened a shop in Garsila market from which he sold medication. And what clearly emerged from the evidence in this case is that the accused was a person of some renown, highly respected in the Wadi Saleh area even before the conflict. Sometime in 2004, after the events of this case, he became a member of the Central Reserve Forces, the CRF, in which organization it appears he remained until shortly before his surrender to this court on the 9th of June 2020. That surrender came about as a result of arrest warrants being issued by the pretrial chambers as long ago, first of all, as 2007, and then again in 2018. The arrest warrants were issued in his legal name, but also with the nickname Ali Kushaib. And so let me turn to that name, Ali Kushaib. During the course of communications with the prosecution for his surrender, the accused made a video recording in which he clearly and unequivocally stated, "I am Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman, and my nickname is Kushaib." However, from the time of his arrival at this court, he denied that he was in fact Ali Kushaib. Accordingly, the chamber heard from a number of witnesses who had known the accused well, either as friends, army colleagues, or because they were with him during the period of the charged events. The chamber also heard from witnesses who had been to his pharmacy in Garcilla and subsequently recognized him as both present and taking part in the commission of the crimes charged. The witnesses whom the chamber found to be the most persuasive were those who knew the full name of Ali Kushaib to be Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman, or a variant thereof. Further, that they had a credible and reliable basis for their knowledge of his name and nickname, and gave evidence of interacting with and or seeing or being in the presence of Ali Kushaib during the charged period. It is right to point out that a number of witnesses called by the defense who had known the accused in Rahat al-Badi stated that they did not know him by that nickname, nor had ever heard it applied to him. The chamber was unpersuaded by the evidence of the witnesses called by the defense and is satisfied that the accused was the person known before and during the period of the charges as Ali Kushaib. I turn now to list the charges. The accused stood trial on 31 charges divided into the areas in which the crimes occurred, namely, first, Kudum and Bendizi. Count 1, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population as a war crime. Count 2, murder as a crime against humanity. Count 3, murder as a war crime. Count 4, pillaging as a war crime. Count 5, destruction of the property of an adversary without military necessity as a war crime. Count 6, other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity. Count 7, outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime. Count 8, rape as a crime against humanity. Count 9, rape as a war crime. Count 10, forcible transfer as a crime against humanity. Count 11, persecution as a crime against humanity on political and ethnic grounds. Thank you. Mukjar. Count 12, torture as a crime against humanity. Count 13, torture as a war crime. Count 14, other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity. Count 15, cruel treatment as a war crime. Count 16, outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime. Count 17, murder as a crime against humanity. Count 18, murder as a war crime. Count 19, attempt murder as a crime against humanity. Count 20, attempt murder as a war crime. Count 21, persecution as a crime against humanity on political, ethnic and gender grounds. As far as the leisure is concerned, count 22, torture as a crime against humanity. Count 23, torture as a war crime. Count 24, other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity. Count 25, cruel treatment as a war crime. Count 26, outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime. Count 27, murder as a crime against humanity. Count 28, murder as a war crime. Count 29, attempt murder as a crime against humanity. Count 30, attempt murder as a war crime. And count 31, persecution as a crime against humanity on political, ethnic and gender grounds. Next, I turn to the formation and arming of the Janjaweed. The Chamber finds that the mobilization and arming of the Arab tribes started after a meeting in September 2002. This meeting, which gathered members of all Arab tribes in Darfur, was prompted by security violations and tribal conflicts, and had among its objectives to eradicate tensions, malpractices, and direct or indirect causes of security issues. However, it was after the promulgation of the emergency plan that the government of Sudan, exploiting existing tribal tensions, used the Janjaweed to assist them in countering the rebels. In the early stages of the conflict, the Janjaweed used camels, horses, and donkeys as their mode of transport, but the government of Sudan later provided them with more military equipment and vehicles, such as land cruisers and trucks mounted with a gun, known as a DSK, on the back. During the period of the charges, the Janjaweed received funding, training, such as it was, and weapons from the government of Sudan. Numerous witnesses spoke of weapons distribution taking place in the Wadi Sada area during and after 2003. Weapons and other military material were distributed on government premises, including on the Sudanese Armed Forces premises, the CRF and the PDF bases. Although in 2003 these were largely distributed by a man called Lieutenant Hamdi, the head of intelligence in Mukjar, the accused was also involved. On at least one occasion, shortly before the Kudum Bindizi operation, Minister Haroun, then State Minister for the Ministry of the Interior, together with other senior army commanders, arrived at Mukjar in a helicopter and delivered weapons and funds for the Janjaweed. Members of the Fur tribe were denied the weapons as they were on each weapons distribution. According to at least one witness, the reason for the government of Sudan using the Janjaweed was that they were not constrained by any of the rules and regulations which applied to the regular government of Sudan forces. Next, the question of state policy. The Chamber is satisfied that the attack against the civilian population mounted by the government of Sudan forces and other semi-regular forces, including the Janjaweed, was part of a plan designed at the highest level of state and encapsulated, as already mentioned, in the emergency plan adopted on the 18th of December 2003. That plan does show that the conflict had an ethnic dimension. Entire communities of the Fur, Saghawa and Masalit tribes were to be targeted and attacked because their members were all perceived as associated with the rebels and thus as the enemy. and as already stated, the emergency plan specifically stated that the project included the assassination of sympathizers from amongst community leaders and local administration officials. Such orders made no distinction between fighters and civilians, who all seemed to be the target of the planned military operations. And there can be no doubt that the execution of that plan would involve the commission of crimes. Moreover, the commencement of each of the criminal operations was preceded by a visit to the relevant area from high-ranking government of Sudan officials. The evidence of the crimes shows that they came about within two distinct but linked phases. The first, which culminated in the attacks on Kudum and Bendizi, took place in August 2003. The second, involving the towns of Mukjar and Delej, took place in February-March 2004. I start with Kudum and Bendizi. In early August 2003, the rebels mounted limited, in the sense of few casualties were caused by these attacks, limited attacks on Bendizi and then Mukjar. One of the results of those attacks was that the police stationed in Kudum and Bendizi withdrew to Mukjar. A few days later, the accused arrived in Mukjar with a large contingent of the Janjaweed. On or around the 9th of August 2003, a government of Sudan delegation arrived in Mukjar, comprised of Minister Haroun and other high-ranking officials. After a closed meeting attended by the accused, these officials held a public meeting, attended largely by members of the Janjaweed, but also present were local citizens from the Fur ethnic group. The accused, standing near the minister, addressed the crowd, saying that he spoke, and I quote, on behalf of the Janjaweed, and further, the Janjaweed were there to defend the property of the government, and that they were alongside the armed forces. The minister told the crowd to, as he put it, wipe out and sweep away, the words in Arabic being amsa aksa, which are words that figured very strongly through this case. And the Fur do not keep anybody alive, and said that the Fur and their money were war booty or a prize for the Janjaweed. P903, a witness who was present at the time and who was a member of the Fur tribe, interpreted Haroun's statements as dangerous and stated that he felt afraid and immediately left the place. During this gathering, a Fur sheikh in the crowd urged the minister to stop the Janjaweed from looting the houses and properties of the inhabitants of Mukjar. P878, who was also present, recalled the minister replying that the people of Mukjar must return the property of the state that has been looted by their, as he said, their children, meaning, in fact, the rebels, and that if they did not return the property, you will be looted, you will be killed, you will be raped. After this speech, a joint Janjaweed Government of Sudan Forces operation took place in villages to the north and east of Mukjar, which were then burnt. On the 15th of August 2003, a large, heavily armed contingent, estimated to be over 1,000 men, of the Janjaweed, led by the accused, and accompanied by a few vehicles containing CRF personnel, set off towards Kudum and Bindizi, which were administrative regions situated in the Wadi Sala area. Their route took them via the villages of Nayeli, Tiro, Merli, Drangal, and Seda. Kudum and Bindizi and the other villages all had predominantly Fur populations, and none had any kind of rebel presence. In August 2003, approximately 1,600 families were residing in Kudum and approximately 1,800 in Bindizi. In both places, only some men possessed basic weapons to protect their cattle. Over the following 2 days, the Janjaweed swept through all these inhabited places. Whilst only the attacks on Kudum and Bindizi are charged in the present case, the attacks on all the places took the same form. The accused, when ordering the Janjaweed to commence the attacks, accompanied those orders using chants like Alu Akbar and Amsa Aksa. The Janjaweed fired at and chased away the inhabitants, looted properties, taking livestock and household goods before burning down houses. A vivid description was provided by P12. He said, and I quote, "There was a lot of fire. 90% of the homes in Bindizi are constructed using local materials. They are wooden materials, flammable, so the entire town was in fire. It was a terrifying situation. Smoke was coming up everywhere. It's beyond words to describe this. After the attack, it was a rubble of ashes, corpses scattered everywhere. It's the destruction that results from war. All that was left in Bindizi were smithereens and ashes. During the attack, there were senior people and children, and it's difficult for such people to leave. Someone who's 90 years old during the attack is not in a position to flee. So when war happens, you can imagine what that person's fate is. This is what I saw with my own eyes in Bindizi." End quote. In both Kudum and Bindizi, members of the Janjaweed shot and killed people. Some people burned to death inside their homes. In Kudum, P29 recounted that that's the Janjaweed, started firing ammunition in the town, and people started running away, and that the members of the Janjaweed were firing at the citizens. P986 explained that whenever the Janjaweed found anybody, they would shoot. Those captured were beaten and mistreated and generally insulted. An inevitable consequence of this eruption of violence was that women and girls who were captured were raped, some jointly and several times. In Bindizi, P11 and P15 described how the Janjaweed acted together. Some members undressed the women, others threatened and held them down, whilst others penetrated them. Members of the Janjaweed stripped the women of their clothes, using their own clothing to stuff their mouths to stop them from screaming. And moreover, in some instances, the Janjaweed used their weapons or deployed violence upon the victims. For instance, a girl resisting would be held down by 2 men, one on her legs and another on her chest, so that the 3rd man could penetrate her. P1073 was one of the women who was raped and described her ordeal. "I was taken to a deserted residence alone. I was whipped and beaten down. The beating was so severe that I got injured. After that, I was taken to a room, my hands were tied, and after I was raped in the same room, they took me by my hand, took me out of the room, and threw me out of the door. P1073 still suffers from long-term physical, social, and physiological consequences, particularly since she was only 15 years old when the Janjaweed raped her multiple times. Some women were penetrated out in the open and in front of others who witnessed what was happening, including children. And the members of the Janjaweed forced some of the women and children at gunpoint to watch as they committed these acts. The further consequence of these attacks was that the inhabitants of Kudum fled first to the surrounding forest, valleys, or nearby villages. Many of them could not return to Kudum after this attack because there was nothing left there, so they sought refuge in Mukjar and elsewhere. The same happened to the inhabitants of Bindizi. One of the more egregious actions carried out by the attacking forces was to send a CRF member who was known to the inhabitants of these villages ahead of the attacking convoy to falsely reassure the inhabitants of Kudum and Bindizi that they need not flee, as the Janjaweed were only coming to collect fodder for the horses in Bindizi. And unfortunately for the survivors, Mukjar did not prove to be the place of safety which they believed it to be. There has been no dispute in this case that those who were the victims of crimes in Kudum and Bindizi were civilians. No fewer than 46 people were killed during these attacks. Despite the imprecision of the evidence tendered, the chamber was able to identify a number of victims. Rather than simply giving a number, the victims deserve that some of the names are given public acknowledgement. These are but a few of the persons killed during the attacks on Kudum and Bindizi, and more are identified in the judgment. Abdullah Hassan, Bakit Ibrahim, Muhammad Ibrahim Muslim, Hassan Muhammad Hassan, Fakir Umar Yaqub, the Imam of Kudum Tine Mosque, Halima Issa, Koni Haroun, Mohammed Kamis, Hussein, nicknamed Jurgi, and Adam Suleiman. I turn now to the crimes in Mukjar. The population of Mukjar, again, was predominantly poor. According to a UNHCR report, there were around 1,800 households in Mukjar before 2003. But during the events of 2003 and 4, as a result of the forced displacement from other villages and towns, this number increased to over 4,100. Between August 2003 and February 2004, further attacks by the Janjaweed and Government of Sudan forces took place not only in Kudum and Bindizi, but on the outskirts of Mukjar and other villages surrounding Mukjar, including Arada, Tendi, Abela, Dembo Kabde, Kiroro Sigigir, and Nyali. This resulted in the mass displacement of people living in those villages towards Mukjar and the nearby mountains. Some displaced villagers had to live on the streets in Mukjar. During the same period, military equipment and money were distributed to the Janjaweed in Mukjar. The weapons were delivered at various locations, including at the police station, where the Janjaweed would come to collect them. Around February 2004, the accused coordinated the onward distribution of weapons to umdas of the Arab tribes and the Janjaweed at the SAF base in Garsila over a period of 2 days. Although the SAF commander in Gasilla oversaw the distribution from a distance, the accused was the one deciding who should receive weapons, which included Kalashnikovs and machine guns. On the last day of this weapons distribution, again, a delegation of high-ranking GOS officials, including Minister Haroun, arrived by helicopter at the Garcilla SAF base and distributed money to the Janjaweed. In early 2004, the accused and the Janjaweed, together with the GOS forces, Government of Sudan forces, left Garcilla going towards Mukjar. Their route took them through the villages of Arawala and Jamina. The villages were also looted and burned. The contingent, including approximately 6,000 members of the Janjaweed, arrived at Mukjar in late February 2004. They arrived in vehicles filled with military equipment, as well as on camel and horseback, and had weapons, again, such as Kalashnikovs, machine guns, and DSKs. The accused was also personally armed with a Kalashnikov and an axe. After some days, a contingent comprising the Janjaweed and the Government of Sudan forces, led by the accused, attacked various locations between Mukjar and Sindhu in a joint operation, the purpose of which was to destroy a rebel stronghold in Sindhu. Before leaving, at Mukjar police station, the accused held a meeting with high-ranking officials. And during that meeting, the accused told the police chief that anyone coming from the direction of Sindhu to Mukjar must be registered and detained until their return from the operation. The Sindhu operation was successful, and a few days later the accused and his forces returned to Mukjar, attacking various villages on the way. After arriving in Mukjar, the Janjaweed looted and burnt down the houses before most of them left the town. Checkpoints had already been set up in and around Mukjar in February and continued in March 2004. They were manned by members of the Janjaweed and the Government of Sudan forces and intended to control the arrival of people who were fleeing the previous attacks on the surrounding villages. People were stopped and searched at the checkpoints. Men were separated from women and children, systematically arrested, taken to the police station and its prison. Young men in particular were searched for weapons or physical signs that they had carried weapons. Community leaders from Mukjar and the surrounding areas, such as the Umdars and Sheikhs, were arrested. These community leaders were detained immediately without being questioned. Sometimes children were arrested and detained. And at the checkpoints, the internally displaced people from surrounding villages were often accused of being rebels. Terms such as Tora Bora, Nujus, and criminals were used by the people manning the checkpoints, all of which being terms of abuse. And around 400, again predominantly poor people, were arrested during this period. During the same period, the Janjaweed and the Sudanese forces conducted house-to-house searches and arrested people in their homes, the market, and other places. Indeed, the accused personally arrested a foreman on about the 1st of March 2004. When four policemen of Fur ethnicity were brought to and detained at the police station, the accused was standing in front of the door of the detention room and was heard saying, "Tomorrow we will show you who you are and who we are." Following these systematic arrests, at least 100 men and boys, predominantly from the Fur tribe, were taken to and detained at Mukjar police station. Again, The detainees who came from different villages included a number of sheikhs and umdars, two examples being Umdar Yahya Ahmed Zaruk and Umdar Issa Harun Nur. They were held in several rooms or cells, including the prison, the police presidency, and headquarters. The detention cells were overcrowded, dirty, and hot. There was no place to lie down or move around. Whenever new detainees were brought in, they would be pushed into the cell so that people were actually positioned on top of each other. The detainees were scared, hungry, thirsty, and tired. They had limited or no access to a toilet or other sanitary facilities and were forced to urinate and defecate in the overcrowded cells. They were given little to no food or water and were not provided with any kind of medical treatment. Again, Minister Harun visited Mukjar on or around the 1st of March of 2004. He gave a speech in which he saluted the government of Sudan forces and thanked the Janjaweed. He told them, "You did a good job chasing away the rebels and cleaning the area." He also visited the police station at Mukjar, and during his visit the detainees were ordered to leave their cell and stand outside between the roundabout and the cell where government officials had gathered. The accused was heard telling Harun, "These people are rebels. We arrested them with their umdars." They were photographed, the detainees, and filmed by a cameraman, while other government officials again called them Tora Bora and accused them of being rebels. And Harun was heard telling the detainees, "Today and tonight I am going to destroy you all." Over the course of at least 2 days, the accused, as well as the Janjaweed, the police, and CRF personnel entered the cells and physically and verbally abused the detainees. The accused introduced himself as Ali Kushaib and as the leader of the Janjaweed. He proceeded to hit the detained umdars and sheikhs, as well as other detainees, with his axe. In particular, he hit Umdar Yahya Ahmed Zaruk on the shoulder, thereby breaking it, whilst threatening to kill him. On other detainees, the accused used a whip. Again, while hitting them, the accused hurled derogatory terms at them, such as slaves, magus, Tora Bora, and rebels. And again, the Janjaweed, the police, CRF personnel also beat detained persons at the police station. All were beaten without exception, some with sticks, others with some kind of whip. The detainees fell over each other in their attempts to escape the beating, and at least one witness still bore the scar from the beating when he gave evidence. The assaults were not limited to beatings. One detainee was burnt with an iron, another had what felt like hot plastic thrown at him, and other men had their ears cut off. Due to the appalling conditions of detention and the abuse inflicted by the Janjaweed and the government of Sudan forces, many detainees suffered physical harm, and at least 3 died as a result of their injuries. The culmination of these events in Mukjar were the summary executions. On or around the 2nd of March of 2004, several officials and officers held a meeting at the police station compound. Lieutenant Hamdi and the accused were both present. During the meeting, the accused was heard to say that he wanted all the displaced persons in Mukjar dead, and when there was an objection to the effect that they should not kill those who came down from the mountains to surrender, the accused was heard answering, "I can communicate directly with the minister. Who are you to tell me this? I would only waste one bullet to get rid of you. Thereafter, the accused, accompanied by members of the Janjaweed and Government of Sudan forces, went to the cells and ordered a number of the detainees to be taken out. He hit several of them with his axe as they were exiting the cell, including Umda Yahya Zaruk and Umda Issa Harun Nur. At least 52 people were loaded into several vehicles. The Janjaweed and the GOS forces continued beating and insulting the detainees, including the Umdas, throughout the journey. The convoy travelled approximately 1 kilometre, or about 10 minutes, before making a first stop at a place called Khor Talaba. After the vehicles stopped, the accused ordered some of the detainees to get out of the vehicles. He then ordered the detainees to lie down in a line and then instructed the Janjaweed and the Government of Sudan forces to shoot and kill the detainees. The Janjaweed and Government of Sudan forces started shooting. It lasted approximately 20 minutes. Thereafter, the convoy moved to a second site near Nyali, and the remainder of the detainees were shot. After the shooting, the executioners walked over the bodies. No fewer than 50 people were executed at these sites. There has been no dispute in this case that the men detained and or later executed were civilians. The following persons were amongst those killed outside of Mukjar: Mohammed Abdel Karim, Abdu Mini, Hassan Abdallah, Ibrahim Muhammad Ali Balut, Adel Beidi, Yusuf Muhajir, Adam Mohammed Babe, Umda Yahya Ahmed Zaruk, Umda Adam Hussein Abdel Mahmoud, and Umda Issa Narun Nur. Finally, I turn to the crimes in Delege. At the time of the events between the 5th and 7th of March 2004, the town of Delege was located in the Wadi Salah locality. It's approximately 17 kilometres northeast of Garsila and was predominantly Fur. By early March 2004, there were more than 16,000 internally displaced persons living in Delege. And following the Sindhu and Mukjar operations in February and March of 2004, the forces which conducted them had returned to Garsila. And around this SAF base. Those detained, again, included community leaders, ordinary citizens, policemen from the Fur community, officials, civil servants, secretaries, administrative officers, and tradesmen. Amongst the leaders were a number of umdas, sheikhs, and a man called Janif, the PDF coordinator in Garsila. Umdas Kindiri, Kamis, and Janif, having been interviewed, were released, and the three men fled to Delege to join their families. Around early March of 2004, a delegation of high-ranking officers arrived at Garsila SAF base by a helicopter. The accused often accompanied the delegation during its stay. And thereafter, the same force which had taken part in the Mukjar operations, namely members of the SAF and Janjaweed, deployed to Delej. Between the late evening of Thursday the 4th of March 2004 and the early morning of Friday the 5th of March, armed Janjaweed and Government of Sudan forces surrounded and then entered Delej. Following an identical pattern of events as Mukjar, checkpoints were set up, house-to-house searches took place. During the operation, the Janjaweed and GOS forces arrested predominantly fur men and boys from the streets, outside mosques and from houses, arrested without interrogation or explanation. Others were questioned about where they came from, their affiliation with the rebels, and the whereabouts of weapons prior to being arrested. The Janjaweed accused the Fur people of being Tora Bora and used further denigrating language when addressing them, referring to them as Abid, meaning slave, and Haimar, meaning donkey, which is a particularly demeaning insult in the region. The Janjaweed also threatened, beat, kicked and hit with sticks and rifle butts both men and women while executing the search and arrest operation. Those arrested, all of them men, were taken to the Delej police station. Some were taken in vehicles, others were taken by armed Janjaweed and GOS forces on foot and horseback. They kicked and beat some of the detainees en route to the police station, using whips and wooden sticks. Umdar Kindiri was personally arrested by the accused. From around 7 a.m. on the 5th of March, the Janjaweed and the Government of Sudan forces detained the arrested men and boys aged from about 13 to over 60 in a large unfenced area outside Delej police station. On their arrival at the police station, or soon thereafter, the detainees were ordered to lie face down on the ground in systematic rows. They were not permitted to raise their heads or look to either side. All appeared to be wearing civilian clothes. Some had their hands bound behind their back. Numerous members of the Janjaweed and the Government of Sudan forces surrounded the detainees, keeping them under close guard. At least 100 detainees were detained outside the police station. The accused arrived there at some time before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a hot day, and the detainees were forced to lie on the ground in the sun for several hours. They received no food or water, and were denied all requests, including access to a toilet. Whilst they were lying on the ground, the Janjaweed walked on their backs, stamped on them, and hit them with fists, whips, and sticks. And the accused personally stepped on them and struck them with what was described as a stick-like object, almost certainly his axe. Sometime later that day, he stood at the entrance of the detention room where Janif was held. After questioning him briefly, the accused told a police officer to get him out of the detention room. When the cell was opened, Janif came out, and the accused hit him with his axe 3 times on the side of the head. He fell to the ground, bleeding very heavily from his nose, mouth, and the wounds on his head. Janif died some 10 minutes later. The accused then told the first sergeant at the station to lift him and throw him outside. Ali Abd-Al-Rahman, the Sheikh of Massa, also known as Sheikh Mota, was brought to the police station with a group of about 6 or 7 people. After asking who he was, the accused then struck Sheikh Mota in the head with the same axe that he had used to hit Janif, causing Sheikh Mota to fall to the ground. The accused instructed his men from the Janjaweed to throw Sheikh Mota in the back of a vehicle. He died as well as a result of being struck by the accused. Events in Dalej culminated in an identical fashion to those a few days earlier in Mukjar. Whilst the sequence of events is not entirely clear, they began in the late afternoon of the 5th of March. The accused instructed his men to load the detainees onto waiting land cruisers. The Janjaweed and the GOS forces shoved them forcefully onto the open backs of at least 2 land cruisers while beating them. And they were packed tightly in the open backs of the vehicles. The accused supervised the process, counting the number of men being loaded onto the vehicles until the capacity of each vehicle was reached. One of the vehicles contained a man named Issa Haroon and his son, aged 13 or 14. The vehicles drove away, returned sometime later empty, and the process was repeated on a number of occasions. The following day, over 40 bodies, including that of Issa Haroon, were found in an area near the Tolda mountain, near Tolda, a mountain just south of Dalej, and it was clear that they had been shot. On the same afternoon, the 5th of March, a convoy of approximately 13 land cruisers departed from the police station, collectively carrying between 70 to 80 detainees. The convoy stopped in an area identified by the accused near a village called Ferry. The accused then issued instructions for the detainees to be taken off the vehicles. They were then made to lie on their stomachs on the ground in a line. The accused issued instructions for the convoy to, as he put it, execute the instructions, and members of the convoy shot dead all of the detainees present. Following the killings, the bodies were left on the ground. No one survived. At roughly the same time, at least 2 vehicles transported at least 40 to 45 detainees from Dalej police station towards an area called Koska. At that stage, one of the detainees escaped by jumping out of the open back of the vehicle. On arrival, the Janjaweed and Government of Sudan forces removed the detainees from the vehicles and told them to lie on their stomachs on the ground. They then threatened to kill them if they did not tell them about people carrying weapons. The response from the detainees was that they did not see or hear of anyone carrying weapons. Surrounding the prone detainees, the Janjaweed and GOS forces started shooting them. Then they stopped, and then they resumed shooting. Most were shot in the head, some in the shoulder, while at least 2 were shot in the abdomen area. After the shooting had ceased, the Janjaweed and the Government of Sudan forces started smoking and chatting. They checked that the detainees were dead, shooting those who were not. In fact, 3 men managed to survive, 1 uninjured, 2 with grave injuries, and one of those 2 later died. The bodies later found there and identified included those of 2 young boys. This was not the end. Detainees still remained at the police station, and the beatings and assaults continued. On the morning of the 7th of March, several detainees, including umdars and community leaders, were removed from the cell inside Dalej police station and placed on the open back of a khaki-coloured vehicle similar to ones which had been used 2 days earlier. The vehicle and its occupants were seen by several witnesses in the Dalej area, and in the days that followed, word spread amongst the local population that the community leaders had been killed near Ferry. These men have never been seen again. There has been no dispute in this case that the men detained and or later executed were civilians, or at the very least hors de combat. The following persons were amongst those killed at Delege police station and outside of Delege. Adam Abd-Al-Rahman, nicknamed Janif. Abdallah Musa, Issa Haroun and his son, Abu Bakr Suleiman Abakar, Zachariah Abdel Mawla Abakar, both of whom were no more than 12 or 13 years old. Umdar Jido Khamis Abd al-Karim, Umdar Mohammed Suleiman Abdul Shafa, Umdar Adam Degez Ahmed Abdul Shafa, and Sheikh Ismail Abdul Aziz. Finally, I turn to the role and responsibility of the accused. As already stated, the Chamber is convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused was the man who bore the nickname Ali Kushaib. And the crimes that I've just described demonstrate the role that he played in those crimes. But there is additional evidence which establishes his position and influence. His relationship with the leadership of the government of Sudan, in particular Minister Haroun. Before each of the attacks, Minister Haroun and or other top-level military and civilian leaders arrived in the Wadi Sali area and held meetings attended by the accused. The accused himself explained on more than one occasion that his instructions came from the top and only took instructions from Haroun and Hussein. Second, his relationship with leaders at the more local level, such as the commissioners of Garsila, the head of the CRF in Mukja, and in particular Lieutenant Hamdi, the head of the military intelligence branch in Garsila. Third, the fact that many people believed that he was an Agid al-Oghada, translated as a colonel of colonels, but a senior tribal leadership position. His role in the recruitment of and distribution of military material to the members of the Janjaweed, and as importantly, the fact that he exercised authority and control over those who were known to be his deputies, as well as the rank and file in the Janjaweed, who were heard to address him as Commander Ali. And indeed, there was public recognition of his role. A Government of Sudan report referred to him as Commander of the Al-Fursan, in other words, the Janjaweed. As demonstrated by the facts relating to the crimes, the accused played an active role in their commission. He encouraged and gave instructions that resulted in the killings, the rapes, and destruction committed by the Janjaweed in Kudum and Bindizi, mainly by the exhortations which accompanied his orders to wipe out and sweep away, or God is great, Allahu Akbar, and the words, don't leave anyone behind, bring no one alive. When one brave man objected to what was happening, the accused told him to leave. In the crimes committed in Mukja and Delege, the accused was not only giving orders for the arrests and in subsequent incarceration of those arrested, but was personally involved in the beatings, and later was physically present and giving orders for the execution of those detained. Accordingly, the accused is convinced that the Chamber is convinced that the accused is guilty beyond reasonable doubt of the crimes with which he has been charged. Its verdicts are unanimous. Stand up, please, Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman. The Chamber's verdicts are as follows. For the war crime of attack against a civilian population, count 1, under Articles 8.2e1 and 25.3b of the statute, committed during the Kudum and Bendizi operation, guilty. For the war crime of pillaging, count 4, under the relevant articles, and committed during the Kudum and Bendizi operation, guilty. For the war crime of destroying the enemy's property, count 5, under the relevant counts of the statute, again committed during the Kudum and Bendizi operation, guilty. For the crime against humanity of other inhumane acts, count 6, under the relevant articles of the statute, committed during the Kudum and Bendizi operation, guilty. For the war crime of outrages upon personal dignity, counts 7, 16, and 26, under the relevant articles of the statute, again committed during the Kudum, Bendizi, Mukja, and Delej operations, guilty. For rape as a crime against humanity and a war crime, counts 8 and 9, under the relevant articles, committed during the Kudum and Bendizi operation, guilty. For the crime against humanity of forcible transfer of population under count 10, committed during Kudum and Bendizi, guilty. For torture as a crime against humanity and a war crime, counts 12 and 13 and 22 and 23, under the relevant articles of the statute, committed during the Mukja and Delej operations, guilty. For murder and attempt murder as a crime against humanity and a war crime, counts 2 to 3, 17 to 20, 27 to 30, under the relevant articles, committed during the Kudum, Bendizi, Mukja, and Delej operations, guilty. For crime against humanity of persecution, counts 11, 21, and 31, under the relevant articles of the statute, on political and ethnic grounds during Kudum and Bendizi, and on political, ethnic, and gender grounds during Mukja and Delej, guilty. In respect of the charges under counts 14 and 24 for the crime against humanity of other inhumane acts, and the charges under counts 15 and 25 for the war crime of cruel treatment, the Chamber concluded that cumulative conviction was impermissible, and therefore did not pronounce a guilty verdict. The accused may sit down. An order will be issued today which will deal with the procedure to be followed upon sentence. And that concludes today's hearing.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.